Hi, it's Sam here from SampleLiveReview.com, and today we're checking out the emotive and earthy tones in a wonderfully intimate offering from Fracture Sounds called Petrichor. It's a small but perfectly formed ensemble, providing everything you need to create delicate and unusual woodwind textures. Petrichor is a 3GB download via native access, and it runs in the free Contact Player 6.7 or higher. There are 8 woodwind instruments: bass, tenor, alto and soprano saxophones, clarinet and bass clarinet, bass flute and alto flute. They are grouped into low and high woodwind ensembles. There are 11 unique articulations, with 1 raw signal and 8 atmosphere layers. So here we are in the now familiar engine for many of Fracture Sounds products. We've got the dynamics and expression at the top, which basically gives you a visual indication of where your CC1 and CC11 are. Then colour for broad brush EQ, and reverb mix with options under the cog icon. Articulations are clearly presented below and can be purged from RAM by pressing this power icon or command clicking. To the right is the mixer to blend the raw mic signal with 3 channels of atmosphere. Each has solo, mute and a sample load button. The atmospheric intensity knob is a dedicated dynamics controller for the entire atmosphere layer and mapped to CC1 by default, as the main dynamics knob only affects the raw signal. To set global preferences, just click the cog here on the left, and up pops a window for tightness, which is sample start, dynamic range, which flattens any volume differences but retains the timbral changes, and assignable key switches. It's also nice to see the credits in this section too. Right, let's check out some of the high winds first, consisting of alto flute, clarinet, and alto and soprano saxophone. These are their sustained longs that evolve using vibrato, aptly named wisps. It's a lovely ethereal sound, especially when the atmospheres are combined as a subtle layer underneath. I'll isolate the various channels later, but for now let's hear the smart trill patch. This one also plays sustained, but will intelligently recognise when a chord you are playing has trills available, and instead of a long wisp it'll switch to a delicate trill. I'll solo the raw channel here to more clearly hear them. That's a really effective way to get some quicker melodic movement going in what would otherwise be a more straight up paddy sound. To maximise these, it's best to play tightly grouped chords, as they only trigger trills on major second, minor third and major third intervals, though it works equally well spreading your fingers more and only occasionally adding in a note that will trigger a trill. The transition from a wisp to a trill is so smooth that the whole experience feels seamless and very musical. Each player is trilling at different times and speeds as they play off each other, which gives an appealing randomicity to the sound. I also love how gentle the playing is, soft enough to hear some of the mechanical movement of the keys being pressed. Check out this more drony example, playing in octaves and occasionally adding trills into the mix, then taking them out again. As I only use the mod wheel and no expression here, it also reveals a key feature of this library in that the dynamics are as much a coloration control as a volume increase. There's not a huge amount of loudness difference here. For me, it's more about going from a more breathy timbre to one with less noise and more pure instrument tone. This is just wonderful in giving us more nuanced control over lower dynamics. Should you need more obvious volume increase, simply combine CC dynamic moves with CC11 on expression. Here are the blooms, which naturally rise and fall, with a bit of atmos and some hall reverb to extend the tails. The fact that these swells are sporadic and different on each note gives it a slightly uneasy and unpredictable feel, which I really like. It's perfect for more subtle underscore and to blend with other parts to somewhat glue things together. The soft accents here are very unique, as velocity not only increases the intensity and volume, but also the length of the note. There are 3 unique lengths with higher velocities triggering longer notes. It's a really cool concept. Whatever the length is more of a gentle tenuto, rather than a more peppy staccato that we'd typically see in traditional woodwind sampling. As a very playable tool for a more textural pointillistic approach, they are superb, especially when you vary up your velocity. I'll switch to the low ensemble now, which follows the same articulation mapping, so you can get a taste of the bass flute, bass clarinet, and tenor and bass saxophone combo. Generally, they're a bit more restrained compared to the high woodwinds, which get a little more flighty. Here are some examples of them playing swells. Both are over 3 bars, with the long at 90 BPM and the short at 120 BPM. You get 1 bar rising, 1 bar falling, and the final bar steady. Again, we hear more of a timbre change here with a restrained volume curve. While not tempo sync, they are gentle enough to work okay a few BPM either side of the recorded tempo. I find performance swells so useful in libraries as they always feel more emotive than a programmed swell via the mod wheel. As showed, you can of course add the dynamics to make the swell more obvious. It's also interesting to stagger them for an undulating pad kind of feel. For the final 2 main articulations, let's get up the full ensemble patch. This one has a 2-octave crossfade from the high to low ensembles, which is silky smooth and ideal if you need access to a wider range of pitch. The spores sort of combine the wisp and accents, but in a unique performance, so you'll hear sustained notes but with sporadic short accents poking through. Arguably, they're a little subtle for me and not hugely different from the wisps, but they do especially highlight the breathy tone and intimacy that we hear across the library. Wild Wisps replicates the wisps we heard earlier, but at the very top of the dynamics a new layer comes in with multiphonic swells. This is especially useful for taking it into more chaotic realms. So far, I have more often been solo in the raw woodwind channel, but a key part of this library are the atmospheric layers. There are 8 on offer. The first 4 sound like manipulated versions of the woodwind recordings, and the other half are synths, deftly programmed to complement the softness of the live instruments. Any 3 can be combined any one time, and the overall level and some timbral changes are controlled by the atmosphere intensity dial. They don't change depending on the articulation, but do still seem to blend very nicely with whatever the woodwinds are doing. I'll give you a brief example of each. We can get a really cool hybrid sound by reversing the typical use of Petrichor, which would have the woodwinds loud and proud and the atmospheres as an underlayer. So here's an example with the atmospheres taking precedence and the woodwinds lower in volume, just adding a hint of realness. I'm also dialing in the onboard shimmer reverb here. Other exciting experimentations can be had by shift-clicking articulations to play more than one at a time. If I get a different mix balance and less reverb and then combine articulations, you can get some really dense and unusual sounds. Now, as a bit of a bonus utility extra, there are some additional patches with alt articulations. Essentially, these give options for more precise control of some of the main articulations. For instance, to have more tightly timed swells, we get a patch that will sync them to your DAW tempo. There are alt smart trills too, which include the wisps layered softly underneath for a fuller sound. Of particular use are the 3 trills separated out, and this time just a single note will trigger the trill. They reveal the wonderful way in which the different players all vary the timing of their note transitions. It gives a wonderful effect where the sound can tessellate for a moment before becoming more unhinged again. Finally, we've got the multiphonics isolated from the Wild Wisp patch. Here is the low ensemble playing those overblown, more aleatoric notes, each of them looping around. It's refreshing to see woodwinds being used in a textural context, as opposed to strings, which always seem to be the first choice for this sort of thing. Even more refreshing to have so many saxophones, which take up half of the entire band. It's rare to hear them used in this more subtle fashion. The playing, recording and implementation in Petra Cor is so impressive. My only real criticism is that, with the high quality of the recording clearly evident, more mic options would have been nice to have. That said, the single mix is very good with a distinctly close and dry sound, and just a smidge of small room ambience. This approach really preserves the detail in the notes and all the individual player subtleties that are so appealing when working with small ensembles. It also gives the user total flexibility to add whatever amount and type of reverb they so desire. What's great about Petra Cor is that whilst the sound is unusual, it never gets too crazy. That would then limit how useful it is. The soft and earthy character here is perfect for long pads and drones to create an instant mood, and the addition of the atmospheres makes it flexible for less obviously orchestral sounds. In context, it has an uncanny ability to blend so nicely with a variety of other sources, be they acoustic or electronic in nature. Petra Cor is a specialist library, but one that will get far more regular use than most boutique products, and when you consider the very reasonable price, it's certainly something I'd encourage folks to seriously check out. Please like, share and subscribe, and let us know below what you thought of Petra Cor. Check out the site samplelibraryreview.com for all the latest reviews and the weekly deal compressor.